Welcome to the Handy Guys podcast. Once again, I'm Paul.
And I'm Brian.
And we're the Handy Guys. And guess what? We are now, of course, not only in audio, but in video. You can find us in audio and video. So if you're listening to us right now in your feed or on your iTunes, you can find us also in audio. And the easiest way to find us on video, of course, is to just go to our webpage, handyguyspodcast.com, and we'll put our YouTube feeds, and then you can find us. You can find our YouTube channel. And if you want, you can subscribe to us right on YouTube.
That's right.
So tonight, we are going to talk about a topic we've mentioned before in our podcast, but now we're doing it on video, so you're going to see it. And that is pneumatic nailers. Now, Brian, this is a tool that used to be in the contractor's toolkit, but more and more, we're finding that a typical handy guy or handy gal is using the pneumatic nailer.
That's right. They're useful for a lot of different kinds of projects.
Exactly. And we're going to talk about when you might want to buy a pneumatic nailer, what it's good for, and why you have so many different kinds.
Quite a selection here.
But I have this question for you, Brian, and
What's
we're going
that?
to answer that. Do you still need one of these?
Yes, you do, Paul. Come on. You
All
need
right.
to have your hammer.
All right, we'll talk about that as well. But first, let's give out our contact
All right, just go to
information.
our website, www.handyguyspodcast.com. If you have a question for the Handy Guys, just go to the contact tab. All the information is there. Or you can just email us at handyguyspodcast.com.
All right, Brian, I want to talk about pneumatic nailers, and specifically, I want to talk about why there are so many different kinds.
Right.
And what they're good for as far as the different kinds. What are the
Yes.
advantages and disadvantages? And where you might start. If you're a homeowner and you're looking to buy a pneumatic nailer, where you might buy your first tool. So let's start.
Well, let's just start with, essentially the main difference between pneumatic nailers is the size of the nail and the type of the nail that it's going to put out.
Okay.
Right? And you can see we made up a little demonstration here. We have everything from a staple to a framing nailer to a 15 gauge nailer, a 16 gauge nailer, 18 gauge, and 23 gauge nailer. So as the gauge goes to a larger number, it's a smaller nail. And they all have different applications. So depending on what your project is, Paul, will drive what your first nailer purchase is, and also then your compressor that would go along with that.
Okay, so I'm going to assume, for instance, that a nail has a bigger head, and of course, as you can see from the back of this, is longer. That's going to be, this framing nailer is going to have more hold. It's for more structural applications like framing walls,
That's
obviously, given its name. And as you go to the bigger gauges, as you said, just like wire.
The
because
bigger number, right,
after
is
all,
a smaller nail.
Yeah, nails are made from wire, so like electrical wire or nails, the larger number, smaller. A finish nailer, 23 gauge pin nailer, for instance, is going to be used for detailed woodwork where you want the least amount of interruption and hole to that woodwork, and especially if you're going to stain it naturally or something like that, you don't want to have to fill in a big hole.
Exactly. Something like this is going to be for fine woodworking projects. It's not going to be for your home improvement projects.
Okay, so a small nailer like this, even though it might be one of the lower priced ones, is really a specialty nailer, not necessarily the first one you're going to purchase.
It's definitely not the first one you're going to purchase, but very useful for what it does.
So woodworking, fine little detailed pieces.
What was your first nailer, Paul?
Okay, so let's go through these. I, go right for the middle of the pack, and I think it's this one here.
Nope.
No, that's the wrong one. Here it is.
There you go.
18 gauge nailer. Oh, 16.
No, 16
okay.
gauge.
So really, finished nailers, there's three of them that are finished nailers. And when I say finish, I mean for finished carpentry. So for crown molding,
for trim,
window trim,
baseboards,
that kind of thing. You really have about three to choose from. You can go with a 15 gauge angle nailer like this.
That's right.
An 18 gauge, or excuse me, a 16 gauge, which is the next step up, which is not an angle nailer, or what do you got there? 18. You have a couple 18s,
or
right?
an 18 gauge nailer.
That's 18. So that's the smallest. 16 is in between, of course, and 15 is the largest. Now let's talk about the differences between these three. These two here and the other little one.
Well, your 15 and your 16 gauge nailer are very similar in the size hole that they're going to do, very similar in capacity as far as the length of the nail.
Right.
Where the main difference is one is angled and the other is a straight shot. So this allows you to get in tight to the floor, where that one can sometimes be a little awkward.
Right, and that also helps if you're in the corners of crown molding or something in a corner of a wall. That angle gives you a little more space to get into that
right.
crevice or corner.
Right.
Now the other thing you notice on all of these, and we talked about the 15. The 15 is going to have a bigger head, so it's going to have more of a hold on it.
Right.
So it's going to hold that wood a lot better. It's good for flooring applications around the outside of floors.
That's right.
The 16 is going to have an okay hold. The 18 is going to have a lesser hold, but also do the smallest amount of damage.
Right. So like if I'm rescreening a porch, let's say, and I'm putting on the screen molding, I'll use the 18 gauge nailer on that, or a door stop or a window stop. Something very small, I'll use those 18 gauge brads.
And now on each of these nailers, there's also some important information. They say, obviously, the gauge, but they also say what size nails they'll use. So this one, for instance, this is my 16 gauge nailer, which, by the way, I bought because it was the most versatile. It was kind of a compromise between the 15 and the 18. So it has pretty good hold, and it can use nails from 3/4 inch to 2.5. And you want those longer nails when you're doing crown molding so that they can get through the angle molding and into the wall at the same time.
Right. Whereas your angle nailer, you can't put a 3/4 inch nail in there, or at least with the one that I have and most that I'm familiar with.
Ones, yeah.
This one will go 1.25 inches is the shortest nail you can use, up to a 2.5 inch nail.
Right, so you want to look and consider the size nail that it can use. Now you also, I think, have a couple of 18 gauge nailers that can use different size nails, right?
That's right. So this 18 gauge nailer, so I don't nail myself, can use a 5/8 inch nail, very short, up to 1.25 inches. Now some of the newer ones can go a little bit longer in an 18 gauge.
So there's actually not a lot of difference between that and this pin nailer, except the pin nailer is going to be even smaller and even less obstruction, a smaller hole.
That's right.
You barely even see it with this.
That's right.
So this is really a good finish nailer, but if you get to some of the bigger crown molding, it's not going to cut it.
It's not going to work for crown molding. It's not going to work for baseboards, but it will work for those little quarter round shoe moldings, things like that.
Okay. So you have all these different tools. Now, those are the finish nailers. Let's move up.
Right.
We've talked the framing nailer. This is obviously your largest nailer that we have here. Actually, we have another one we haven't shown yet.
Right.
But this is the largest of the nailers on this table, and it is for framing walls, 2x4s. If you're going to frame walls, you want to finish your basement, this is the nailer to get.
That's
and it seems heavy and awkward at first, but once you get used to it, you'll never go back to this.
Right. This is for your general construction work.
Yeah.
You're not going to be building furniture with something like this. You can get nails for doing a deck if you wanted to nail it. You can get nails for putting down plywood or sheet goods, things like that. The only thing it's not going to do is roofing. We don't have a roofing nailer here to show you, but that's a specialty nailer if you're putting down shingles that you would use in that application.
And once again, I was going to say, Brian, with this, a lot of different nails you can use for this. It tells you the sizes on it, and also there are different kind of framing nails. There's ring shank nails, which hold in better. There's smooth nails, and you don't want the wrong nail. I started with ring shank nails when I started framing walls for the first time ever, and every time you had to make a mistake to pull one of those out,
it's really hard.
It's very hard. So
right, and then there's also, which we don't have one to show you here, but there's a full head nail and a clipped head nail.
Good point.
They're two different styles of nails, and it's a different nailer for each one. Some jurisdictions don't allow the clipped head nail. It's like a half of a head of a nail.
Right.
The advantage of it is you can get more nails into the magazine versus
the full head, which that's a full head.
Right.
So in some jurisdictions, especially in hurricane zones, they do not allow the clipped head because they have less holding power.
That's right.
So you have to consider that when you're getting a framing nailer and make sure you get approval from your local inspector on what kind of nails you're using.
That's right. You don't want to frame out a whole basement and then find out you used the wrong nails, right?
That would be a problem, and don't say, don't blame us.
Right.
All right. So these are the nailers.
We have one more we didn't talk about.
We do. Let's.
Stapler.
Oh, a stapler.
Right. So this is not for stapling screen, but the advantage is you have two prongs, and this can hold quite a bit, has a lot more holding power than a single nail, so it doesn't pull out as easily. So there's lots of different applications for this. Some people will use it for carpet and things like that.
All right, up next, I want to talk about one or two other nailers that are important. They may not be the first nailers you get, but you might want to add them depending on the project. And we'll also talk about deciding which nailer is the first one you buy.
Okay.
All right, Brian, I want to talk about just a couple more, actually one more tool, and this is a flooring nailer. And it looks like this. There's another brand that's really famous.
Right.
And
that's a very specific tool, Paul.
Yes.
You got to have a very specific project for a tool like this.
Right. So if you are going to put down a wood flooring, tongue and groove, this is the tool to get, and it will save you a lot of time. What's interesting is you used to have to rent these.
Right.
But now you can find some off brands in certain places that work pretty good. You hook it up to your hose on your compressor,
right.
You hook that in there, and then it comes, whoops, wrong hammer, comes with a mallet. You hit it with your mallet, and that actuates the nailer and puts it into the tongue. Where is it, the groove?
It puts it into the tongue.
Into the tongue of your tongue and groove wood flooring.
And also the function of hammering on it also helps tighten those boards together.
Yeah, so while this makes the job easier and allows it to get done well, it's still a backbreaker. So you're still going to have a sore back.
Putting in a wood floor is a tiresome job, regardless.
Let's talk about this.
Okay.
You start as a homeowner. You now have access to all these pneumatic nailers, and you can go out online. Go to your home center, get deals on them. You can get packages, of 3 finished nailers,
3 or 4 nailers in one,
and a compressor all in one package.
Right.
Do you still need this?
You definitely still need that.
You still need a hammer.
Sometimes it's just more convenient. You're doing a small job, and let's say you're just putting up one little piece of trim. 3 or 4 nails and you're done. Why drag out the hose, the nailer, the compressor? You got to oil the nailer.
How about
find electricity?
Hanging a picture. Maybe you need to put a little brand
hanging
on the
a picture.
wall.
And sometimes, Paul, I just want practice. I like the feel of having a hammer, pounding a nail, and not hitting my thumb or bending over the nail. You need the practice every once in a while.
Exactly. And there's one thing this doesn't need. And that's air, right?
It doesn't need air. It doesn't need electricity.
So if you do need air for one of these nailers, what are your options? You need a compressor,
You need to get an air compressor, right?
Okay.
So you have some very small compressors to compressors that are taller than the ceiling, right? They're huge. So we've got your little compressor, your Makita Max 700. I love that compressor, Paul. It is so quiet and so lightweight. Now, you're not going to be able to
It's not super light, by the way.
It's about 40 pounds.
Yeah, you can move it.
You can move it around pretty easily. And it's not going to keep up with a roofing nailer where you're going bam, 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 nails one after the other.
Because it's going to want to come on. If you have a larger nail, say like a framing nailer, it's going to come on every handful of nails or something like that.
That's right.
I think if it's one hammer, it's 10 to 12 nails on a larger nail. Right. You got 2, then it's every... Now, because it's not super loud, you can get away with that. You're not a contractor, you're a homeowner, you're nailing away. Okay, it comes on every 10 nails or whatever, but it's not super loud, so you can get away. But if you're doing roofers, like you said, you need to make sure you're not concerned about sound. You need to make sure it's not holding you up, right?
Right, because it's got to have full compression in there as you're doing your nailing. So when you're using a small compressor like that and you're using your framing nailer, you may have to pause every 10 nails or so, pause for 10, 15 seconds, right?
So if you're a higher end contractor, you have multiple people working for you with nailers that are large, you're going to need a bigger tank, a stronger compressor. If you're using tools for automotive and wrenches and things like that, then you're going to need a bigger tank.
They need a lot of air, or paint sprayers, different things like that. You're going to need a high volume of air. But for most stuff, a small compressor like that for the average homeowner is excellent.
Now, what I like about this model is that, like you said, it's not super loud, but it also handles the small nailers like this all the way up to the framing nailer, and that's great for the homeowner because some of them that you get, like they make compressors that are really lightweight for finished carpenters, and they're perfect for them because they can carry them around the house and they don't disturb the homeowner if someone's in the house, that sort of thing. But they can't power the higher end framing nailers.
That's right.
So this is a good compromise somewhere in between, and it does the job.
Yep.
All right, so that's it for pneumatic nailers. Hopefully you can find one you like. If you have a question about them, if you want to know where you should start, find out what job you're trying to do, figure out what you're trying to do. You can always let us know, and we'll give you a recommendation on the right nailer for the job. But otherwise, that's when you buy it. You find the work you need to do. If you're looking to buy your first one and you think, oh, I have a lot of nails to do on this cabinet that I'm building, this fancy woodworking, then maybe this is the right nailer, the pin nailer, or I'm doing crown molding, you're going to look at an 18 or 16 gauge nailer maybe, or floorboards or flooring 15. So it just depends on the job. That's where you start with your first pneumatic nailer.
All right, that's it.
Thanks for watching the Handyguys podcast. We'll be back next time.